To another edition of our Anchored in the Word morning reflection. And today we're back in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, and we're only looking at one verse together today. It's a simple verse, but it's a very practical verse. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 18. Let's look together at the verse. He says, "By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through." Let me say that again. By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. I want you to picture for a moment that you're driving, maybe in a rural setting, could be somewhere in the Midwest, it really could be anywhere in the country, and as you're driving along, you see this old barn, and you drive by this barn day after day after day. Nobody lives on that property anymore, nobody's taking care of it, and after days go to months, and then months go to years. As you drive by, each time you notice that the building seems like it's falling apart just a little bit more. And then one day you drive by, and what do you see? A collapsed barn. A lot of us have seen something like this, and this is exactly what Solomon's talking about here. In fact, he's giving us a simple picture about the importance of not just building things, but maintaining the things that we build. So let me give you a simple summary statement for this verse, and then talk a little bit about the practical implications of it. If we don't maintain what we build, we'll soon have to rebuild it. That's a simple summary statement. If we don't maintain what we build, then we will soon have to rebuild it. We know that it takes a lot of energy to plan a project. We know that we're supposed to count the cost and make sure that we have both the financial resources, we have the energies that we need, that we've prepared well before we take on a project. It's nothing more frustrating than seeing someone start something and then never finish it. And so we know that it takes energy for that. We know it takes a lot of time and energy to actually build something that has value. When we look at a huge building, we look at a facility, when we look at a business that someone's building, we recognize that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy to get to a point where you actually have an infrastructure that's well developed and can actually be used and can accomplish a lot of things. We know it takes time and energy to be a part of the planning side of that. But I want you to realize something. This is what Solomon's emphasizing here. Once we build something, there's a lot of time, energy, resources, and planning that go into making that thing that's been built have longevity. It's actually useful for many, many years. It's something that we're able to actually enjoy, or we're able to use for a long time. In other words, once we build something, there's a lot of energy that goes into maintaining what we've built. And really, the entire season of the life of that thing that's been built is going to be determined by how much energy is put into maintaining it. In fact, it's really interesting. One of the things that we learn in life as we get older is how important it is to take care of our bodies. When you're 15, when you're 20, you don't think about what you're eating. You don't think about how much time you spend exercising. Then you start getting into your 30s, and all of a sudden you start realizing, well, my metabolism's slowing down a little bit. Some of the things that I used to eat all the time, all of a sudden when I eat them, I don't feel so good like I used to. I'm starting to gain a little bit of weight. I'm starting to lose mobility. I'm starting to get to the point where I can't do certain things. And then as you get a little bit older, you start seeing that it's a little bit more difficult, and you see the impact of those things a little bit more. So even in something as simple as our own physical bodies, we begin to realize, and sometimes later in the game than we need to, that if we don't eat right, if we don't sleep enough, if we don't exercise properly, then we're going to start losing the ability to do certain things. Or when we build a house, we build that house. If we don't maintain that house, after a couple of years, you're going to start noticing that you have problems in lots of different areas. And the more we let those things go, the bigger the work is going to be, or the more the financial resources are going to be used up that go into actually correcting those problems. And so what Solomon's basically saying is, if people are lazy, if people don't plan, if people don't labor, if they don't take care of what they have, eventually they're going to lose it. And when he talks about the building decaying and the house dropping, the implication is you're going to have to actually tear down what's been built, which takes time and energy, and you're going to have to go through the whole process of planning and rebuilding once again. In other words, by not staying up with the problems that routinely happen with a building or with the infrastructure of some kind of a thing. By not maintaining it, you're going to have to tear it down and rebuild it. And so this is a principle in life that's so very, very important. If we don't regularly invest in maintaining what we have, eventually we will lose it, and all of the time, all of the energy, all of the resources, all of the labor will have been wasted, and it will have to be reinvested in replacing what we've lost. So here's the question: how do we practically apply a thing like this? Let me give you a couple of things I jotted down today that I think are very common sense, but are also very important for us to remember. The first thing is this: things don't build themselves, and just like they don't build themselves, they don't maintain themselves either. I remember when I was getting to the point where I could, start thinking about buying a vehicle and telling my dad, hey, I got enough money to buy this vehicle. And I remember him saying, do you have enough money to maintain that vehicle? In other words, it's not just planning to buy it, but it's planning to put fuel in it. It's planning to change the oil regularly. It's planning to take it to the mechanic shop and get it fixed when it has a problem. He said, do you have the money not just to buy it, but to keep it on the road? Well, we recognize that things don't build themselves and things don't maintain themselves either. If we're going to build something, we need to be prepared to maintain it as well. Secondly, before you take on a project, count the cost. In fact, really counting the cost is not just something that we do on the front side, but it's something that we do throughout the lifespan of something. In fact, you could get to a place where you have a vehicle that you say, you know what, it's not worth keeping it on the road anymore. This vehicle costs more to keep on the road and to maintain than it does to buy a new one. And so at that point, you make a judgment call to replace what you have. But the idea is the longevity of what you have is connected to whether or not you maintain it. Thirdly, it's not just the cost of planning and building, but maintaining. And really, that's part of what I said before. There comes a point where we ask, is it worth keeping this building, this car, this facility, or do I need to replace it? What I do to maintain it has a lot to do with how long it lasts. And the last thing I want to mention is this: we need to stay motivated to actually maintain what we have. There's a lot of excitement in planning to build something new. There's a lot of excitement in building something that's new. There's not a lot of excitement in maintaining it. But maintaining it may be almost as, if not more important, than the energy that's spent in building something, in planning for something. We recognize that we need to put good quality into the construction projects that we use, the people that we decide to have do the projects, the materials that we use, the kind of things that we put into it. We know that value is important on the front side of something. But we also need to recognize that value is important as we maintain it as well. Now, I've talked a lot about material things like buildings, the kind of projects that we work on in life. But I want you to realize that this principle, the principle of maintaining what you have, doesn't just apply to the stuff that we use. The reality is that this principle also applies in relationships. When I think about relationships like our relationship with our spouse, our relationship with our children, a relationship with people in the churches that we attend, a relationship with the people that we work with, a relationship with God. The fact is that if we don't maintain those relationships, if we're not investing in the maintenance of those relationships, there will be a day when those relationships will deteriorate. And if those relationships deteriorate to a certain level, it's possible that those relationships will be broken to the point that they cannot be resolved properly. And we may even lose those relationships. So I want you to realize that the principle of maintaining what we have is not just about physical things, but it also applies in the area of relationships. I want to leave you with a final thought in Proverbs 24, where Solomon takes this concept and he expands it a little bit more so that we really see the weight and the significance of maintaining what we have. Here's what he writes in Proverbs 24. He says, I went by the field of the slothful, by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. The person who's lazy and the person who doesn't see the value in maintaining what he has. That's really what he's saying. He says, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof. The stone wall thereof was broken down. He said, because this person didn't have the sense that it's important to maintain what they have, what they had that had value was beginning to deteriorate. And it was getting to the point where it was no longer usable. And he says, then I saw, and I considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. That last little phrase really stands out. That word want means that you lose what you have. He says it comes like an armed man. In other words, he's saying by not maintaining what you have, you will lose what you have, just as if someone has come in by force and stolen it from you. You know what's really interesting? We all recognize that if somebody breaks into a person's house and they steal their possessions, that's evil. We recognize that if somebody breaks into somebody's home or somebody's business and they destroy the substance or they steal the things that people have, we know that that's evil, okay? And we recognize that and we denounce that. But I want you to realize that what Solomon is stating is that when we don't maintain what we have and we lose it because of our own laziness, we have essentially ended up in the exact same place. Whether someone has stolen it or we've allowed it to go away because we've not maintained it, we lose what we have. And so Solomon says, by not working hard to maintain the things that we have, we essentially allow someone to steal it from us. And that someone is not a person. That someone is the natural deterioration of time in a fallen world. And so when we talk about entropy, things go towards disorder and things break down, the reality is by not maintaining what we have, we essentially will lose it. I want to encourage you not just to work to maintain the things that you have and use, but I want to encourage you to work hard to maintain the relationships that God has blessed you with. Those relationships are far more important and valuable than the things that you use. And so let's be a people who don't just invest on the front side of things and of relationships, but let's be a people that are diligent to maintain what we have. Not just the things that we use and the places where we live, but the people that we enjoy interacting with. Let's invest in those valuable relationships, and let's invest in our walk with the Lord. Let's bow together for a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the opportunity to reflect on such an important principle. Help us to be diligent, not slothful, not lazy when it comes to the maintenance of what you've given to us, our stewardship in this life. Help us to maintain our homes well. Help us to maintain our relationships well. Help us to maintain the things that we have the opportunity to build and use in this life. And may we do it for the honor and glory of you. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. If this has been a challenge to you and an encouragement, I hope that you'll share that. It's been good to talk to you this morning, and Lord willing, we will meet again next week on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye now.